Welcome to the Covering Data podcast, covering guests from the data, development, and IT world. Welcome everybody to the Covering Data podcast. My name is Eric Strom with Covering Data Consulting, and with us today for podcast number 5, I think now, is Andy Leonard with Enterprise Data Analytics. Andy, would you like to introduce yourself to those who don't know you?
Yeah, sure. My name's Andy Leonard, as Eric said, and I'm very honored to be on Covering Data podcast here, especially number 5. I'm one of the originals now. I'm an OG, okay?
OG.
Number 5, single digits.
Great.
So it's a huge honor to speak with you, Eric, and I really appreciate you reaching out. I live in Farmville, Virginia. I am an engineer, which is kind of a warning if you've been around engineers before. I enjoy doing work with data, but I've got experience doing work building software, and I kind of tinker in a bunch of different things. Probably made a big enough public splash in data engineering and data integration, starting with SSIS, and now Azure Data Factory. And those, in fact, about 75% of my consulting jobs right now are involve both. So people are trying to move from SSIS to ADF in some form or fashion. Mm-hmm. And gosh, I could prattle on, but I've worked on book projects. I was an MVP twice. And it just huge honors to, all cards on the table, Eric, to be honest. I feel over recognized. There's a lot of really, really smart people in this field, and I'm just happy to be one of them. So I say it, I didn't say it the right way. There's a lot of people in this field, and I'm happy to be one of the people in this field. But then when I think about the really smart people in this field, I think, there's a bunch of really smart people in this field plus me. That's, that's kind of the way I like to say it. But yeah, it's, I'm very happy to be here, and thank you. And people can, dig me up. I'm not hard to find. If you put in Andy Leonard data, you'll probably find me.
Yeah, exactly. And I kind of feel that way sometimes too. And that's one of the interesting things is like, there's lots of really smart people out there, and some of the people I think are just super brilliant that I mentioned the names. A lot of people are like, oh, but it's also people who really put themselves out there too. So sometimes recognition, quote unquote, star power, and being the smartest guy in the room aren't always the same thing. And I'm not like trying to call anybody out or anything, but it's just it's just a fact of life. If you put your face out there, then people probably have heard of you more. And versus like some of the crazy smart people also don't like being in front of people as much. You know what I mean? Like just
right.
Smart.
Yeah. And I saw, I was around. I won't say before Twitter, but definitely before Twitter got as big as it is now, and it became very big in the data community. I want to say in the 2008, 2009 time period, there were a lot of people doing that, and I saw people step away from that, and I don't know if it was because of Twitter. Well, I'm certainly not blaming Twitter for that, but I think some people were uncomfortable or less comfortable, and others use Twitter, as a marketing platform, and they've done really, really well. And I'm not fussing. If anything, I'm admiring that people are able to market like that. I'm lousy at marketing.
Yeah.
But I was kind of engaged before that with the community. I really got engaged around 2005 or so, 2004, 2005, in very small ways. Mm-hmm. In 2006, a book project I worked on with there were 10 of us, Brian Knight, Darren Green, Alan Mitchell. Those were the MVPs on the team at that time, and a bunch of other, like I said earlier, really smart people plus me. And it turned out to be a very popular book. And it was a great first book project. Um,
What
Book
was that one
projects
called?
2 and 3. It was Professional SQL Server Integration Services 2005, I think. It was a Rocks book, and it was back when Rocks put your picture on the
Yeah.
cover. And so the way they did that, if you go look at that, you could see it on Amazon still. They put the MVPs first, so they're like, da, da, da. And I think they did it by alphabetical last name. And then they put the rest of us in by alphabetical last name. And of course, L's right in the middle. I am front and center. I wrote 2 chapters in that book, but it looks like I wrote this book and all these people helped. It's not true, but it kind of had that that appearance about it. So it was a fantastic project to work on. I was actually working at Allstate in Jacksonville, Florida at the time. Brian Knight was my boss.
Oh, really?
And I'll never forget, I had early on in working there, Brian came over and asked me about, data transformation services, DTS. And he was one of the 3 authors on that like Bible thick novel they wrote.
Right.
And he taught me DTS in about 4 hours. And if you're going to learn DTS, back then, I don't know, 18 years ago or so, it didn't hurt to learn it from Brian Knight and
Yeah, no
have
kidding.
him undivided for free and undivided for 4 hours. And I really learned a lot. It really upped my game in data integration and data engineering. It was one of those pivotal moments in my life. And so, yeah, that book project came out around 2006. And I think I joined Twitter in 2007. And then there were blogs and stuff that were out in that time period. SQL blog was a big hub of
That was a
different
good one.
bloggers.
Mhm.
Yeah. And you mentioned before we got started, we talked about Jamie Thompson. I like to mention Jamie as anytime I can because he's smart. And I feel like, if I can be associated with his name, that it makes people think I'm smart. Um, but he's scary smart. I learned an awful lot from him as well over the years, and still consider him a friend. Hope he still considers me one. I don't know. I may get over to the UK next year, and I'm hoping to. I've just started traveling again. In fact, just last month, I did my first travel since early 2020, and but yeah, it's I totally agree with you. There's a lot of people in this field that are really, really smart. I feel like even people who aren't as experienced as you and I in data, you mentioned 22 years. I'm not there. I was doing data before 2000, but not much. I was more of a software developer interacting with SQL Server, and before that, Access. But there's people that have, I don't know, less than a year of experience, and they know something I don't, and that's not uncommon. That's not like some crazy aberration. That's like everybody who knows anything, who's been working with us for like 12 months. They know something I don't, and it's people. When I say stuff like that, people say, "Oh, you're so humble," and it's like, no. I mean, I appreciate you thinking I'm humble. I'm in here with me, and I know I'm all kinds of messed up, but it's not. I don't think about it in that terms. I just think about it as realistic. And what I really like about being over recognized is when I have these conversations with people, they'll share with me stuff they're working on and and every single time, Eric, it's like, I hadn't really thought about it that way. And it just adds something to the list to think about, maybe learn more about. And I love learning. That is a fact. And so luckily we're in a field where it's almost a requirement that you spend a good chunk of your time learning just to keep up.
Right, right. And you're kind of tapping into my secret reason for doing this. I had David Cleon just recently, and the I hadn't looked at like hardware stuff, like especially IO, SANs, and all that kind of stuff for quite a while because I've done a lot of dev and architecture stuff lately. But
Yeah.
like he got into some of the stuff of like, oh yeah, this stuff is awesome, and just having that conversation with him had me do some really deep dives into AWS and how kind of their IO infrastructure set up, and I caught some really interesting things, and that was just he didn't even tell me about specifically about AWS or anything like that, but it just kind of lit a fire under my butt after having that great conversation. I'm like, oh, I got to dig into this now. You know what I mean? So it's really great talking
Well, it's hard to,
our people.
yeah, it's really hard to be talking to anybody about, it's hard to be David Clee. And when you're talking with anybody about that, somebody who I kind of listened to a lot, actually a couple of people, Glenn Allen Berry and Joe Chang are people that I've learned an awful lot about that from. David, and having conversations with David, learned an awful lot about that sort of stuff. And I know David and his wife Molly.
Cool.
They're good people. I haven't chatted with them in a couple of 3 years, so I imagine that they're still doing the business stuff together. I hope so. But scary smart, both of them. But both of them are very intelligent people, and yeah, you could have done worse learning or getting a fire lit under you by someone about infrastructure.
Yeah.
David's
Yeah.
top of the game, and others. Joey D'Antoni, Denny, and others. I'm not trying to. I know I'm leaving people out, and again, it's not intentional. It's just me getting old.
There's lots of smart people out there, but I'm kind of curious. We were starting to talk a little bit about it, but I always like hearing kind of people's how they got started in in IT, and you were talking a little bit about it, and it sounds pretty fascinating. You want to talk about that?
Sure. So I was 11, living not far from where I live now, about 20 miles over, and this is back in the 75. Okay, so when that summer I turned 12. Before I did, I learned Motorola machine code from a neighbor who was a retired engineer from the U.S. Air Force, and his name's John Barker. John passed away a few years ago, but he changed my life. And later, after I turned 12 in 75, I learned BASIC, and it just kind of was a hobby. But nobody had home computers back then. You had a Southwest Technical Products M6800, Motorola 6800 chip, and it was just an incredible coincidence that he lived next door, and that he was willing to take the time to teach this loudmouth 11, 12-year-old kid stuff about it. And later, I went into the Virginia Army National Guard. I worked on TOW and Dragon missile guidance systems. They were tank hunters, those missiles, and still are. And did that for 6 years. I was joking with you before we came on and said that during my 6 years in the Virginia Army National Guard, no foreign invaders invaded the Commonwealth, and I take partial credit. So that's a funny line. I've been repeating that over and over again, but it's funny. And I became an electronics technician for a while. I kind of jumped the fence into manufacturing, and I was surprised to find the great grandchild of that Motorola 6800 running in Allen Bradley programmable logic controllers, or PLCs, and it was a 68,000 chip that was in there. And you're not going to be surprised to learn that a lot of the machine language was the same, and so we could actually flip around in the GUI and program in machine code if you couldn't figure out how to do it in ladder logic or in some of the other ways they displayed the program for that. And so, that was a bit of an advantage. I was able to do some stuff, and people would look and go, how do you know? It's like, well, I used to have a pretty good memory, Eric. It's not as good as it used to be, but 20, 25, 30 years ago, it was better. And I just remembered from back when I was a kid And then I did electrical control systems. I became a Class A electrical contractor. I built control panels for manufacturing. Was a Class A electrician. Sorry, a master electrician actually, and a Class A contractor. But I never wired a house, and people find that odd. My son Stevie Ray did electrical work for about a year. He just jumped into IT a couple months ago, and he knows way more about wiring a house than I ever did. But along with this came human machine interfaces, which were PCs that ran programs like Wonderware was one, and Alan Bradley and Rockwell Software. Rockwell bought Alan Bradley, and they had something called RS View, and it was a similar human machine interface, or HMI. Back in the 90s, I was playing around with web stuff. This was before active server pages and dynamic HTML on the Windows side of the house. It was all .htm files.
Yeah,
and a couple of things came out of that. One was we were collecting what they call tags. These were data points in manufacturing places. And I redid software for a great big machine that washed wool. It was a textile back back when we had textiles in the U.S., especially in the southern U.S. That went away in the 90s.
yeah, exactly.
But I redid the human machine interface on that. I set all of the tags to the highest frequency of data collection. There was over 1,000 of them, and I was collecting those data points once per second.
Oh, wow.
And I did this over a long weekend, and I was sending it to Access. And I came back after the long weekend, and I went to the machine and went to the file system, and there was a 4 gigabyte, which was big data back in the 90s.
It's a big
4
back
gigabyte
then.
access. Yeah. And it wouldn't open. So to give you a little context, I went back to my office at home. I opened Netscape. I typed in altavista.digital.com, and I searched for Microsoft database. And it was this thing that popped up, SQL Server. Never seen it before.
Oh, sure.
And back then, they used computer shows, and there was one at the show place in Richmond. Like a weekend away, I went there, and for $20, I bought a not for resale copy of SQL Server 6.5.
Wow.
And I carried it back down, I installed it, ran the same test, and it worked. I was able to put 4 gigs of data in it. It was fine.
Oh, cool.
Able to run queries against it. And, I went immediately to the plant engineer, just in case anybody from Microsoft is listening. I'm sure the statute of limitations is not up yet. I went back then, and SQL Server 7.0 had just come out. And I said, you need to buy a license for this, and we'll upgrade it, and you'll be legal, and that's what you need to do. But I definitely did. And I'm pretty sure I destroyed my copy of the NFR 6.5. I'm pretty sure that I paid it $20 for. But it was, that sort of thing. And then, it just kind of grew from there. In the early 2000s, I got my first official developer job. I did that. I was down in Jacksonville, Florida. I moved down there actually for the job. But it was in a manufacturing plant. So that's kind of what they were looking for, was that mix of skills. Do you speak PLC? Can you do Visual Basic? That's what they were developing at that time. And I was certified in VB6, I think. And I became an MCSD while I was contracting there. And my and Christy's first 2 kids were born in Jacksonville, Stevie Ray and Emma. And then we moved back up here a few years later, around 2005. I got involved with the user groups. Brian Knight had kind of drugged me kicking and screaming into the Jacksonville user groups down there. I worked for him at Allstate. And it was just an interesting time. And I met another one of those pivotal life moments is when we moved here to Farmville in 2005. I went to the Richmond.net user group meeting, and I don't know how long they'd been going on, probably for years at that point. .net had been out for years. And I met Frank Lavinia and Nick Harris. And, we were all punks. We were all contractor punks there. Frank now is I don't know, some kind of director, maybe a VP at Red Hat. If he's not a VP, he probably will be. And he's doing scary stuff there. Nick works for the Fed,
Mm.
picked up his MBA from the Sloan program at MIT last year. He's just, scary smart. And it's one of those friendships that has just gone through several, rather, not certain, several iterations of not being friends and not being friends, but just we've all kind of kept up. And Nick and I worked together when we started Enterprise Data and Analytics. And yeah, it's just, it's community has been such a huge part of all of that. Just getting to know people and hang around with them and see how they do things. And yeah, Eric, I had this, and you've been around long enough. You probably had this happen too, especially when you're getting started. The first few years, you go and you talk to people who are ahead of you. Is probably the best way for me to say it. They've been doing it longer. They started earlier, what have you, and to see how they're moving and how they're acting and what they're doing, just kind of dig in a little bit. I found that very inspiring, and it was things that I looked at and went, you know what, I should look into that more. I should learn that tech, or I should do that thing, or stuff like that. And in a couple of instances, minority, 5-6%, I look at it and go, I should never do that. if I get to that spot and this, I meet somebody who's like me now, I should never talk to them that way or treat them like that. But it was very, very rare that happened. So it's, I put the whole bubble, the whole then, right, is all under learning. And like I said earlier, I love to learn.
Yeah, it's funny, there's a few things that you were talking about that I could kind of relate to. So that Motorola chipset you were talking about, I'm in Minnesota, right? And I was going to the University of Minnesota, working on a computer science degree at the same time as I, kind of got my first sort of DBA job. I kind of fell into it. Yeah. And I remember that's what they were teaching for the machine architecture, and they were nicknaming it machine architecture. the Motorola chips.
That's funny.
The funny thing is that I got super lucky, and they had an adjunct professor, and it was this guy who worked on the I don't know if you remember the x64 instruction set. I think AMD started with it, and Intel was competing with their IA64, and so we got this guy who just is absolutely brilliant, living the life versus some professor that teaches, right? And I learned so much really cool stuff about CPUs and instruction sets. I mean, I don't use it anymore, but yeah, that was a really cool class. And the adjunct professor is kind of like, with what you're talking about, that's the difference with somebody who's like pure academia. Not that people aren't smart and in the know there, but versus somebody who's actively doing it top of their game in the industry. And that was a lot of fun. But
well, you really need both, those two.
Yeah.
I think both of those are important. And I'm a little jealous of people who went and got a bachelor's degree in computer science or even engineering. I have an associate's degree. And, it took me 6 years to get that, so I was working at the time, had a couple kids. And so I totally get it. And I know people who dropped out of high school and are at the top of the game right now in both data and computer science software. And it's just, I see that as a very cool thing. I know some other people who don't, and I understand why. It's they did it their way and it worked for them. And they're not trying to be malicious about it. They're trying to say, hey, this is a way to success. I know because I walk, and I'm the same exact way. I walked this path, and I saw this way to success. And, it just, I say, just, don't feel like you've lost out if you hit a wall or you try something and it fails. My gosh, if you read some of my favorite authors in the community, I like reading about their failures. Andy Warren, Steve Jones, they're heroes and friends.
Yeah.
And I love reading about how they share about, yeah, I was doing this thing and then, it just didn't work out. Or I hit this obstacle, or, the parts that break my heart are when I hear stories that people were treated poorly
Yeah.
because of whatever reason. It doesn't really matter what the reason was. There's no excuse for treating people poorly. Um, and, it's, but what, even then, and it's actually maybe more so, Eric, in the cases where people are treated poorly, when they come back
Hmm.
and or they overcome that and all of the other obstacles, it just makes me go, yes, it's
Right.
so cool. You did that, and she overcame this stuff, and he overcame that crap, and it's just like, yes, it's like it's a little bit better, I guess, maybe than thinking about my little story or something. I feel like I had um I I've had some rough patches. And a lot of mine were not all were due to my own mistakes, stuff that I did. And
You and me both.
I've had a varied past. I mean, I gosh, I caused a crisis pregnancy. She's 40 years old and the mother of two of my grandchildren. And so there was that. I was on food stamps and welfare. Got free lunch in school because we were that poor. Um, and while that was all there and real, I learned decades later that there's a difference between what I now call American poor and poor.
Right.
Having done I did a little mission work in Honduras. Me and
Oh, okay.
Stevie Ray have, and then we want to go do some more. We were talking about it last week. In fact, we want to get back down there. But yeah, so and those were my obstacles and my experiences, and that's why when I talk about them, I say it's by the grace of God that I because my faith informed a lot of that. I've been a Christian for 40 years, and that is my story. But that doesn't mean you have to do that, Eric, or any of my other friends. They're all good stories, I think. And I think we should all be encouraged by all the good stories. And, that's part of, I think, what makes community. But
Tell you something really quick.
sure,
Speaking of
sure,
that,
please, please,
um,
please.
so like I used to use Twitter kind of like in the 2010s, 11, something like that. It was kind of fun, They had the SQL help, and people were having a lot of fun, bantering back and forth.
Yeah.
Then, obviously, not too long ago, it kind of became a dumpster fire, right? And you know, I tried to go back, just to kind of seeing, is there opportunity to do some marketing? And for me, it's just like um, it was just too toxic. Just the environment. So,
Yeah.
but the funny thing is, and I've kind of been working more seriously on my faith. I'm a Christian, but I kind of call myself a baby Christian. Like it took me a while to start figuring things out, right? But actually, what I really liked were your posts on Twitter. That was like, you and one other guy were kind of like the shining light on on Twitter, because it was just like,
Oh, wow.
this is wholesome. This isn't somebody bickering about politics, because like I'm at some point you kind of get there's more levels of human experience than the political, right? And so it
Right.
was really nice seeing some of your posts, and like it's not totally a lost cause, but I'll still take a break.
Well, it warms my heart to hear you say that. I've been stuck in here with me even the past 41 years now being a Christian. And I one of the things that I would treat often was, "I am the worst sinner that I know," and usually I get some, some interesting feedback. Almost always somebody would say, "Yeah, you just don't know me that well."
Right.
In a way, that's kind of what I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I know what I think. I know what I feel. Um,
Hmm.
I know the first reaction I have to stuff that no one ever sees, and that sort of stuff. So I
Yeah.
say that, and in the line of being very flattered with that. But this is not some kind of put on. This means more and more every time I say it. Is that any positive that came out of that is purely the grace of God.
Yeah.
And when you mentioned your baby Christian, I'm like, me too. Uh, just it's 40 years isn't enough. 41 isn't enough, and it's the more I go down this path, the more I realize, like, my opinion of me continues to fall,
Mm.
and I don't think it's anything false or some change of perspective or anything like that happening. Although it is a change of perspective, but it's what's really happening is I'm seeing more and more of just what a lousy human I am.
Mm.
And again, and at the same time, the interesting twist on that is that I'm seeing how much more grace has been applied and is being applied, and and how much more that means, the that Christ took my place and paid for all of the sins that I've done in the past, the ones I've committed today, the ones I'm going to commit before the midnight, the ones I'm
Mm.
going to commit tomorrow and next week and the rest of my life. And it's that grace, Eric, is so much greater. And I haven't yet committed a sin that I'm aware of that grace can't cover, that Christ can't forgive. And I just, the more I study the Bible and and learn, the more I see that. I don't know how to. It's this widening gap. It's in my stupid little graphics thinking mind. It's akin to the universe is ever expanding at the speed of light, and that's kind of how I see that grace. Except it never needed to expand beyond what it always was. Make any sense? It's just huge. It's beyond all of this. And there's enough there for not just my sins, the ones I did in the past, the ones I'm going to do in the future. It's enough for everybody's. And
Yeah. And
it just keeps, this dichotomy keeps growing. I guess it's kind of the way. And I've read some interesting theories recently about how
mm,
some scientists believe that space is being created, and that's responsible for the expansion that we're seeing. And there's a lot of new data coming in from the James Webb. I find that fascinating, by the way. I actually got to see it when it was being assembled in the green room, or sorry, the clean room, at
to see it.
Goddard Space Flight Center. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
awesome.
About 10 years ago, I got to go up and take a look at it. A friend of mine is a sysadmin up there, has been for decades. And
Very cool.
yeah, it's you talk about God's timing and stuff. I met him when I was playing in a Christian alternative rock band, and we did a concert back in the '80s, I think it was, out at Virginia Tech, and he was there. We became friends, and still are great friends. Um, but all of this stuff about that they're finding all of this new data. They're getting better data than they ever had. They're they're disproving some theories. They're disproving some aspects of
Mhm.
some theories, and it's just giving them more information. I haven't heard anybody yet saying, well, based on this and all of the other information we gathered, here's a brand new theory that
Mhm.
replaces the Big Bang or whatever. There's a bunch of, I think, I don't know the right word for it, but it's not science. I'll say it that way. It's it's so because if your criticism of a theory based on new data is, haha, you were wrong,
Mhm.
that's not science.
Mm.
That's something else. That's kind of what is probably repulsed you from Twitter, because it repulses me too. It's again by the grace of God that I'm still there. But
Mhm.
um, it real science is absolutely blowing holes in all of the old theories. Absolutely. So when you call somebody, when somebody calls somebody else, I'll say not you, if that's what it sounded like. I wasn't picking on you, Eric. I don't think you've done it. But when somebody says to somebody else they're a science denier,
Oh yeah.
I'm like, you keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means. Because all science involves denying science in a
Mhm.
sense. And it not in the you're stupid or you were wrong, so you should feel stupid, but in the sense of here's more information. Does that fit? The answer is no. Okay. That's okay. What what does fit the new information? And it opens a door for all of these new things, right? Like um, like okay, if what we thought about this is wrong because we got more data now and we see that it isn't anything like we expected it to be,
Mhm.
okay, good. But when do you get to that spot where you say, um, here's based on this new data, here's a new theory that
Right.
in 100 years will have holes blown in it by the next latest and greatest instrument we put out on Lagrange point or whatever. It's that is science. And if you're saying science tonight,
Hey, we
but
had to
but
take
I've
a
been I've
quick
been
break. Go
rambling
ahead.
about the whole sciencey thing, and
Yeah.
it's just I my whole time doing data stuff
Mhm.
has been thinking it was one way and learning it was another or a better or a different way, and and that's just a kind of a normal cycle for me. And I just when I see that, I kind of go, are you trying to help? When you call someone a name or when you make them feel foolish, is that, do you think is that how you're motivated? Because I'm not. Um, I'm not motivated by that at all. In fact, the thing that I learned out of that, well, I was going to say I don't learn anything that way, but I do. And I learned that, you're kind of a jerk. And I want to learn
Right.
from somebody who's not. Somebody who's willing to share the truth
Well,
and not be a jerk.
it, yeah, and well, kind of coming back to what you were talking about science and all that kind of, that kind of
Yeah,
makes me think
yeah.
a little bit about the idea of orthodoxy, right? And you know,
Mm-hmm.
just like let's pick on Big Bang for a little bit. It's like, well, if your department and your biggest academics um, have all of their chips on Big Bang, and then James Webb gets some data that makes it not so feasible, let's say. Um,
Yeah.
well, you know, how many people have like the courage and the humility to be like, oh, I was wrong. Let's start figuring out what you know
Right.
version two is, right? It
Exactly.
so
Yeah, I'm with you.
yeah, so I'm thinking like, even with science, it might take a generation before something that maybe is provably wrong really starts
Right.
to become um, the new thing becomes accepted. And I'm kind of
Yeah.
thinking, paralleling that maybe a little bit to IT, and my poking fun at SSIS on LinkedIn that one day. Well, it's kind of like there's also an orthodoxy in IT, right? And
Hmm.
and like for performance tuning, it might be I learned all these best practices on spinning disk, right? SSD just blows it out of the water. And I was doing that even the last few days. It's like, okay, I thought this was the best practice, but I'm going to check just in case. And so
Sure.
I ended up reading some SQL skills stuff about how multiple files affect IO performance when on SSD. right? Because that's
Right.
a wholly different beast. And
Yes.
so yeah, I think my post partially was about in some ways reminding myself that, while new shiny isn't always better, because that's the other trap that IT people and devs and stuff like that get stuck into. But it's
Yeah.
also like, you know there is some stuff. So one of the use cases I used for ADF, I specifically chose it both to learn it and just to run it through a POC, was a CSV, a gigantic CSV containing JSON data in it. And I
Hmm.
was like thinking, well, I'm seeing all these sources that are um, native JSON. This is cloud first, where APIs are everything. I'm I'm going to surmise that ADF probably is better at JSON. Like it's easier and quicker, and SSIS was kind of a pain in the butt. Um, and so I tried it out, and it went great. But that doesn't mean to me that ADF is the end all be all. It's just like, you know, don't don't forget, Eric, because I'm 22 years and I have my biases, right? Don't
Sure.
forget that
Sure.
there's new stuff. And you were talking about those young folks that have been in there for a year, knowing stuff that maybe you don't. And I totally agree with that too. Stuff changes so fast nowadays, and there's so many
Yeah.
libraries, and yeah, the new people gravitate towards the new experts, right? With the new info, so it's like, you gotta out, like talking about your learning, you gotta always make sure, am I getting outdated, or is the new tech a little oversold, which happens all the time too.
That's crazy talk. Marketing
Right.
never oversells technology. You should. I want to make sure that for all of the people listening, all of the companies creating new tech, they know I said no. It's true. I pick on marketing some, and they earn it some. So, engineering and marketing is it's definitely two different approaches to it, and when they work well together, it's amazing. And I could name some companies, but I won't, that do both well, and they've found the balance. Microsoft used to do it well. That
Mhm.
that I will say, and I'm not. I calls them like I sees them, Eric. Bill Gates, in when he was leading Microsoft, knew the tech. He had written code, and he was a brilliant business person. Probably still is at both. I don't know. I don't keep up with him that much. But when he left, they lost that balance. And it wasn't because they're evil or the people they put in were incompetent. None of that. It's it's that they were all really good at this. Bill's just better. And he held that balance really well, in my humble opinion. Somebody that knows Bill Gates better than me may come back and comment on it and say, "Hey, he was wrong about Bill Gates. I knew him and blah blah." Blah. It's fine. Okay, okay. I'll also learn. I'll be educated by that. But this is just a country boy sitting here in Central Virginia, kind of watching things unfold, and I formed these opinions based on what I saw. And that is a hard thing to do, to get that balance right between business and technology, or business and engineering. And it's very easy for it to go one way or the other. And when it does, whichever way it goes, the other part suffers. And often both of them are self-correcting in that if you move away from making wise business decisions in favor of engineering disciplines, then often the business will suffer. And that kind of corrects itself by either the business dies, or before it dies, somebody steps in and says, all right, we got to do better business. And the same is true vice versa. Somebody comes in that is strong in business and less strong in engineering or tech or what have you. And that can, then the tech doesn't hold up. It doesn't do what the marketers or business people are saying that it does. And that too is self-correcting. So it's just a hard thing to hold in balance. And Eric, this happens to me all the time. I am the world's worst salesperson, period. And as an engineer, I will go out and tell people the truth, which, somebody tells me the truth, I'm like, yes, that's what I wanted to hear. This does this really, really well. And here's this thing you're trying to make it do and doesn't do that well. I'm good with that.
Yeah.
But if I say that to a customer, they're, sometimes what they hear is my software or my solution that I built at this time doesn't, just doesn't work for you. It won't work for you. And this happened last year, 2021. I was talking to a client. I'd done some work for like training 10 years ago, and they needed some help with something. And I'm on the call with the director. It's a global big, you'd know the name, you'd recognize the name if I said the name of the company. And I said, not only do I not know how to do that, what you're asking me to do, but I've never heard of anybody trying it. And it turned out that part of the reason it just so happened, I thought, well, we're going to go find somebody who knows how to do this. The truth, nobody knew how to do this at the time, because it was 6 months later. These people hired me partially because they talked to me before and they knew I was more of an engineer than a salesperson. And they knew that they needed stubbornness. Perseverance. Let's use the more politically acceptable term of, perseverance rather than stubborn, which is what, my mom told me all my life. You are so stubborn. It works. It works for me. It's actually a virtue in engineering.
Yeah.
But they knew that, and they hired me anyway. And I did it. At the end of the story is, yes, we figured it out. But it took months. It took about 6 months. And it was a big R&D project, which I just love. Somebody's paying me to learn, right? What could be better? But about 5 months into that 6 months, Eric, the piece that we needed was released. There was a third party out there working on solving this exact problem that we were trying to solve. The heart of this did not exist. Now, could they have picked up the phone and called any number of other consultants? And, and I don't know how many, but some. I know some. I can name names, but I'm not. But I know some who would have said, yes, we can do that. It's like, the tech doesn't exist. You can't do that. Nobody can right now. Not the way they're asking for it. So, it was, I don't know, it worked out. When something just works out, in my mind, I think grace of God. Okay.
Yes,
but
yes.
that's kind of my default from all of these years of just learning more and more and more and seeing God's grace work in my life all of this time. Does that mean Andy is super Christian? Please. You don't understand how grace works if you hear somebody thank the grace of God and think that person is a super Christian. I'll refer you to Romans, where Paul wrote almost 2,000 years ago, where sin abounds. Pay attention to that word. Sin abounds, grace does more abound. That's how grace works. Okay. You think you should be thinking the opposite of Andy is a super Christian. You should think Andy is a super sinner. Now you're close to the truth, closer than the other. So that's why I think that way. Anyway, I'm preachy. And if you want to edit out the preachy part, Eric, you have my permission to do so. It's your podcast. But one of the things you and I actually chatted about this was you alluded to it earlier when you were talking about faith on social media. It's tough. I'll say it that way. And then I'll say the other half of that, which is, the burden is easy. The yoke is light. The burden is light. The yoke is easy. I get those mixed up because I'm dyslexic. But that's also true. And you're, as a person of faith, you get the idea of now and not yet, meaning that yes, we've had this change, we've had this encounter, and it changed our lives now, and will be that way for eternity, actually. But there's a not yet part. it's not all where it's going to be once we get to eternity. Right now, we see through a glass darkly. Then we'll know as we are known. We don't know as we are known right now. That's part of the not yet, but there's so much more in there. And so there's this. It's called a mystery, and
Yeah.
I think rightly so. And if you
That's
ask me,
okay.
yeah,
No?
exactly right. Like
That's okay.
it's supposed to be a mystery. That's how it's described. So, but
Yeah.
taking a stand publicly, to be a Christian means, it's an invitation to others to watch you fail. And I'm not saying they're doing something wrong. I don't know. That's not my call. My
Right.
call is what I do. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and Jesus judges me based on what I do. But do I fail publicly? Yes,
Hmm.
I fail way more privately. But I'm not called to succeed. I-
Right.
I'm I'm called to say this is better than anything else, and it's so much better that it's the best. That our Creator that made us knows what's best for us individually
Mm,
and collectively, and He said, "Let's do things this way."
mm.
And He didn't say, "If you like, if you can work this in." He just put it
Right.
out there. This is what's best, and if you do it this way, not going to be easy. In fact, Jesus said the opposite. He said, "This is going to be hard. In this world, you will have trouble." I don't know how else to interpret that. It's going to be hard,
Yeah.
but it's still best,
Mm,
even though it's hard. And you're going to fail. At First John,
yeah.
you're going to fail. You're going to sin. If you say you don't sin, you're not only lying, you're calling Jesus a liar. If you say
Yeah.
you don't sin, but when you sin, not if, when, here we have this advocate with the Father who's there with us. And is it a little messy? Yeah, but it kind of reminds me of, I think it was Churchill who said, "I hate democracy, but I hate all those other forms of government worse.
Right.
I hate them more."
Exactly.
It's like, is this messy? Yeah, but it's not as messy as when you try to do this a different way.
Yeah. Good luck on finding better.
Exactly.
Well,
Exactly. So again, your editing is up to you.
oh, no,
I,
no,
I
no.
rarely listen to my voice recorded because I can't stand it. I don't know
Yeah.
why. It's like, why does anybody listen to that guy talk?
Well, here's the thing too. Like, I've held my beliefs very close to my chest,
Sure.
and you know, I've been kind of doing a lot of personal work, and that's been able to kind of open me up to working on my faith more, which
Yeah.
has been a total blessing. Like I've quite literally hid my capabilities, my ability to have conversations with people.
Hmm.
That was always there, and like talking with you, right? And but instead I was kind of hiding, and what I'm finding is there's a lot of courage in putting out your true beliefs, and that's kind of what I appreciate. And I'm just like anybody else, kind of fumbling around trying to figure everything out. And it's great when you see people like, here's somebody who's actually being, and this isn't about being um contrary to everybody or anything. If that happened just de facto, then it is what it is.
Right.
But it's more about just like, you know can I publicly as well as privately be the same person, and even if it's inconvenient or unpopular or whatever, right? And
Yeah.
so that's kind of what I'm figuring out, and that's what kind of attracted me to talking with you more. So
Appreciate
I
that,
do
Eric.
appreciate that.
I'm the same way. We're part of Christianity as another thing Paul wrote, "Work out your faith,"
Mm.
and he didn't just kind of hang it out there. He actually said, "With fear and trembling." And I read that to be kind of more in the this isn't easy, and it's certainly more serious than you may think, and harder
Yeah.
than you may think. And it's I I um I applaud you for for even mentioning that. It's
Mm.
uh it's a difficult thing to do, and I encourage you to continue. And you know, I'm not going to lie about to you or anyone about it. It's hard, but
Mhm.
it's not. It's worth it. I guess is probably the best way to say it. It's worth it.
Yeah.
So
Um,
and go ahead.
I was kind of wondering actually, kind of, since we're running a little low on time, um,
Sorry.
you no, this has been a great conversation, and I really appreciate you opening up about this. Um, I was curious if you had any thoughts, kind of like on you know some of the newer folks getting into data, especially on the, let's say, analytics side versus kind of
Yeah.
on the dev side, even though you've done both. Like, today's a very different world, but at the same time, we've both learned a lot of practices that maybe aren't as common nowadays. Do you have any thoughts about people getting started today? Besides the learning, which you really emphasize, which is great. But yeah, I want your thoughts on that, like from
Well,
new
Eric, when we
folks.
were talking earlier, you mentioned that you were studying uh, and maybe even working towards delivering training, and that you were engaging, others in trying to help you figure out the right path to do that. If you do figure it out, I'd appreciate it if you'd let me know. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
I I started doing training in the 80s back when I was working on alarm systems, and I was in the National Guard.
Mm.
I actually worked on an alarm system that was being field tested here in Virginia,
Oh, sure.
um, mainly because Fort Belfour's R&D lab is also in Virginia. So the engineers who built these systems were, right up the road.
Mm.
Um, and I got a little bit of train the trainer type stuff there. I went to work at ECPI, which is a kind of a technical college here in Virginia. I think it was founded in Virginia Beach and focused on veterans, mostly naval veterans, because of Virginia Beach being a huge port,
Yeah.
naval port. Um, and they've done really cool stuff, and it was a real honor to teach there. Probably the best thing I got out of that, other than the thrill of teaching, was I was trained by another person named Mr. Knight, not Brian. He was a legend in ECPI,
Mm.
and he mentored me on how to be a more effective trainer. And I credit Mr. Knight with making me a teacher.
Mm.
I learned more, of course, with experience. You get better. Um, I still have a ways to go, but
Right.
whenever you're looking into this, a couple of things, a couple of the dynamics that I've noticed, because I've been doing this a lot for the last 16 years,
Mm.
17 years. One of the things I noticed, and I share with you as someone who's getting started and thinking about, delivering training and that sort of stuff, is
Yeah.
training comes and goes. It is very market driven. It is
Right.
an easy way to save $1,000 or $5,000 for a conference and travel and all of the things associated. It's a very easy item to just scratch off and say, yeah, it's November and we are not making our numbers, and we would be willing to do this in March maybe, but not right now.
Yeah.
And you see that not just because of the time of year things are, but also because of just how the economy goes up and down. And more important than that is the perception of the economy going up and down. And I will not go down that path. But what I will say is that training comes and goes. You will
Yep.
see it get, you will see a slew of people sign up over a 6 to 9 month period for your online training or what have you. And
Hmm.
then you will also see 6 to 9 months where it is precisely zero. That will happen. And it has nothing to do with you.
Hmm.
It's not your marketing. It's not the training you've delivered. It's not how many stars somebody's gave you. They're not putting notes on the dark web that Eric Strom is a bad trainer. None of that. It's just cyclical. And I see those waves, and I'm not making those numbers up. I go 6 to 9 months where I have more sales than I literally double my lifetime in training sales. That will happen again, and it'll probably happen 2 or 3 more times before I retire. And then I have 6 to 9 month periods where I'm not making this number up. It is zero. I just sell nothing. And as a consultant, you're an independent consultant, you're a trainer, you're working on training material. It's good to, in my humble opinion, if you're new, getting into the, not just you, but other people coming into the field, maybe listening to this in 2 weeks or 2 years. It's good to cultivate multiple things to do.
Yeah.
I would recommend a book by Scott Adams of Dilbert Comics fame. I'm trying to remember the name of the one book that was so good. I think it was something like How to Fail Your Way to Success or How to Win Bigly. I think it was The Fail Your Way to Success or something like that. I'll have to dig it up and send you the actual link.
Sure.
He is a different kind of thinker, and a lot of his stuff I agree with. A lot of his stuff I don't. And for me, it's not 80-20. It's not that high. It's probably most like the 65-35, something like that. I agree with, disagree with. And it's not that I vehemently disagree with anything he says. I can't think of any one thing that he said and I went, that is just wrong. But I have listened to stuff and said, that's not for me.
Right.
And that may be an important bit of discernment to develop if you're going to be in this business of IT at all. But it is like failing forward is a thing in there. But when he talks about developing skills and he kind of tells the story of his life and how he got into stuff, he talks about he had this one skill which he kind of developed in college. I think it was a finance degree he got or something like that, and he worked for a bank. But then he learned something else. And I can't remember what the other thing was. It may have actually been just like computers, which, okay, so that age of knowing or not knowing computing being a thing is over. But right now, it's knowing or not knowing analytics, as you mentioned earlier. So you can start with that. But if you add anything else to that mix, data plus anything, data plus, in my case, electronics or digital coding, anything, data plus anything, it doesn't double your skills, it squares it. And every time you add a skill, you're adding a number two, you're incrementing the exponent, not the base. And if you think about it that way, it's not me, it's his idea, but he's right. And it really does. And if you get possible at two things, you are way ahead of a bunch of people who know way more than you in either of those things, but not the other. And others who know things, other skills that they're really they're doing deep dive into. Along with that is this whole idea of in business, and business comes and goes in cycles too, just like training budgets. And you'll hear people say, today I hear people say niche down, pick a thing and niche down. And I agree with that. And I agree with being a generalist. And I agree with Scott saying do two or more things. And it's like, all right, Andy, you sound like you're contradicting yourself. I'm not. And I'll speak a little bit about the model that Enterprise Data and Analytics uses. And the very first thing I'll say about it is it's not my model. I learned this from my friend and brother, Brian Moran, and he built this first in Solid Q, Solid Quality Learning, it was called back in the day. And it's a brilliant model. So everybody's subcontracted. And that way, if you have a consulting firm, it's great. There's a lot of benefits to it. There's a couple of liabilities. The thing that can drown you is if you aren't good at sales, or you're not good enough at sales, or the market is just not generating sales for you, then you have people sitting on the bench. So you have to pay those people to sit around and do nothing.
Exactly.
So that's you're hemorrhaging cash at that point, and that's a good way for a business to die. I'm a lousy business person. but I even know that. Okay.
Great.
So the beauty of this model is there's zero bench.
Mm,
Everybody's an independent consultant. When you need somebody to go do that work, you find someone in your network who is an independent consultant, has availability, and is interested in this gig. And
mhm.
it really comes down to having a big enough network. And it doesn't have to be huge. I don't have, I don't have 10,000 followers on Twitter. I
Right.
don't have 10,000 connections on LinkedIn. I am not those people. But the
Yeah.
people that I do know, I'm able to reach out to enough of them and find somebody. And it's either they're the person I need to subcontract to fill this client's needs. Clients reach out to me all the time. And then, or they know somebody. And sometimes I know the person they're talking about, and sometimes I don't.
Mm,
But I mentioned this, I think, before we started recording, but when enterprise data and analytics contracts for Azure Data Factory development or training or SSIS, which still happens, um, enterprise data and analytics subcontracts Andy Leonard Training Inc. That's
ah,
how I get paid. Plus, I own enterprise data and analytics, so whatever money's left over, I get to keep that too. But it's just that way, and I pay me what I pay others.
mhm.
And actually, in fact, I've got a couple of people right now paying more than I pay me. But
Yeah.
it's a silly thing. It's a cute little saying because I get to keep what's left over. So
Right. Right.
there's that. But it's that way with. I'm a lousy salesperson, but I've subcontract somebody to do sales who is a brilliant salesperson, and it's somebody that I trust.
That's
And that
good.
person will never promise anything without talking to me about it and making sure that I'm 100% above board. And frankly, I overpay that person. If you were to look at sales commissions, they get multiples of what's considered an industry sales commission. At the
Yeah.
same time, because I stink so bad at closing, I'm putting more money into multiples of money in the bank than I would because that person is doing their job. And that's after I overpay them. I'm still putting multiples in, right?
Yep.
It's about the math, but it's about more than that. It's about delivering more value than you charge. So
Right.
I am not cheap, but I know what we're doing is worth. And I've got customer after customer after customer who come up and say, when I ask them, and I always ask, did we deliver more than we charge? Did we deliver more value than cost?
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
keep getting yeses. And that's what I want for the young people and for you. Do multiple things. Definitely blog and engage on social media and LinkedIn as much
Yep.
as you can stand. Twitter is in an interesting state as we're doing this recording on the 4th of November. Elon's been at the helm for, I think, a week,
Uh-huh.
maybe a week and a day. And it remains to be seen how that's going to work out. It just, we don't know. But you can still go on there. I post things. When people are complaining about Twitter bots, I'm like, I have Twitter bots. Andy Weather is a Twitter bot. It's a little application running off of an e-machine right over there.
Yeah. Yeah.
It tweets about every hour and says, hey, the temperature in Andy's office is whatever. And outside it's this. That's a bot. Bots aren't
Mhm.
bad. Don't play those silly games. Don't get caught in the word traps that people are planning. They're goofy. And I will include in word traps new words, redefinitions, and also repronunciations. And in my engineering heart, when I hear that stuff, I do this. You ready? I go, that's my reaction to those three things. Anyway, multiple things. Blogs, publishing right now, publishers are begging people to publish books. When I first got into the business, the rule was 30 to 70 rejection letters for every acceptance letter. That has way inverted. Publishers are emailing and saying, would you write this book for us? They're doing that to anybody they can find who's written before. If you're interested in writing, reach out, pitch your idea, and just see. Most of the time, you're going to get a yes now. More greater than 50, maybe more than greater than 80% of the time right now. they're going to say, that sounds like an interesting idea. The only time I've seen people turn down in the past 5 years, maybe 8 years, is
Mhm.
if that company already is selling a book that would compete with your idea.
Yeah.
And if the sales are high, they may do, but even then they'll often say, would you be willing to join this team on the next iteration of the book? And so anyway, writing, blogging, um, I built some software that I sell, and that's a thing that I work on from time to time. It's killing me right now. I'm so busy doing some other stuff that I don't have time to go tweak it because I've got a list of bugs this long that I need to fix. Then I do consulting, I do the training, I do writing. And what's interesting about that is I learn new things when I consult that I blog about and then I write about. Usually, and I've got such a long tail going now, Eric, I can
Mhm.
put a year between, and in fact, I do that. I put at least 12 months in between when I did the work for somebody and learned this trick, and then when I write about it.
Ah,
Yeah. Um,
it's
and
probably pretty safe. Yeah.
well, it's fair, right? They're paying me for my time. It's almost like that time between leaving a job and, you don't want to go solicit a customer or somebody. You want to put some time between that. If you're working for a contracting company or consulting company and you sign some deal that says at the beginning, you're not, you won't solicit for 5 years or whatever, depending on which state you live in, Virginia, Commonwealth of Virginia is one of them where that won't hold water. However, you could get sued. And then you have to go stand in front of the person in the black dress and spend tens of thousands of dollars probably. And it's often just not worth it to do that sort of thing, to defend that. You can
Yeah.
win, but did you really win? Your lawyer won. That's
Process is the losing, right?
right. Right. But
Well,
do multiple things, cultivate multiple things. And that kind of comes out of my heart as a farmer. I plant a bunch of seeds and some things grow and some things don't.
yeah.
Um, the
That's,
the hard part, maybe the art part of farming, is knowing when to go pull up the things that aren't performing as well as they should
mhm.
and let them lay on the soil and shrivel and their nutrients decay and go back into the soil to feed the plants that are doing well. That's a hard call. That's very artsy
Yeah.
as a call, but do multiple things and don't be afraid to pull the plug on something that isn't working. Um,
Mhm.
Again, very artistic call. It's the balance between sticking with it until it matures enough to make a splash,
Mhm.
and knowing that, no, realizing, nope, either it's not going to happen or it's not going to happen now, or what have you. And I've made both calls, and I'm sure I can promise you I've made them. I've gotten them wrong in the past. It didn't kill me. I
Great.
won't say it made me stronger, but it didn't kill me. So
Well,
anyway,
that's interesting that you say that too. Like, even if you try a new venture and it doesn't go so well, I mean, you always learn so much, and on the next thing you try, you're just that much wiser and I suppose more learned,
Mhm.
than had you not tried it. So failing isn't really all that bad unless it's like catastrophic and you're totally blind to what you were getting into. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And you know what? When I started, I was totally blind, and I stuck with a business longer than I should have, and
Mhm.
early on, and it cost me drastically.
Yeah.
So I, I'm not sure I'm fully on board with. It's not really a failure if you didn't learn anything. I think, yeah, it can be a failure, and you can learn stuff, but don't sugarcoat it. Um,
Yeah.
Fess up. Don't walk around with the sandwich boards that says I'm a failure. That's not going to help. But it will help over and over again if when you're younger you make mistakes and
Mhm.
and fail, and then
Yep.
later you kind of get to think about it. And what I've seen is um, kind of being self-aware. In fact, first off, failure helps with self-awareness because they're called blind spots for a reason.
Yep.
So you become more self-aware when you do stuff like that. But it it's these days, Eric, it's not just you that is growing. There's a scene in the J.J. Abrams reboot of Star Trek where um, uh, old Spock from the original, the OG Spock, is telling Scotty that he's going to beam him onto the Enterprise at warp. And he says, "How are you going to do that?" And he says, "I'm using your equation." He hadn't invented it yet. And Scotty's looking over his shoulder. And he says, "Huh, it never occurred to me that space is the thing that's moving." Not that, yeah, and it's that kind of realization. It's we not only live in a time where analytics is changing. There's new shinies every year,
Right.
not every quarter. The business culture and the culture is shifting around. The space is moving. It's not just us and our ship. And so, we're having to deal with, I think, more than we've ever had to in the past. I'll just throw one more insight that actually occurred to me recently while I was studying there's some verses here. I actually do the Moravian texts. I've been doing those for a little bit here, and I find those helpful. And out of that meditation and studying came the idea that none of this is a surprise to God. He's not watching the market and the world and the U.S. culture and going, "I didn't see that coming." That's not in his vocabulary, not in crossing. He's like, he knows everything that's out here. So, there's some comfort in that I just don't know how I was going to say how others live without it, but I'll say it this way, because I'll only put this in the context of I try to be empathetic with others. And I always try to help. And actually those drive each other. We'll have to do like 2-3 more podcasts out of this later. But it does drive. I don't know how I would have survived the past 3 years without that. And really, I could go back. I could say, well, no, back to 2015. That was a hard year. The year I left Lynchpin People, that was hard. And then I could go back further than that and just keep going. But I just don't see how I would have made it without the grace of God. And, and that's one of the reasons why I want to tell as many people about that, because I want everyone to make it. But the past 3 years, I lost my dad. He was old, dementia.
Okay.
I lost a brother to COVID in 2020. And I lost Brian last year, my friend and brother, Brian Moran. And it's just like, those were successive gut punches.
Yeah.
Not equal by any stretch, but those were hard. And I feel like, and I've been saying this now for a year, that I feel like I'm coming back from that. And I am. I'm coming back to more like I feel like I used to feel. It'll never be the same by any stretch, but I feel more, I don't know the right word, but I feel like more of my mind I can work more like I used to work. I can think more like I used to think, even though those things they're not going away and they're not fading. That's not the right word, but I guess I'm getting more used to living with them not being here. And I'm confident that I will see them again. I am, and that has grown, and it's helped offset the gap. And and I've gotten more used to it too. So yeah, it was a tough run, the past 3 years especially. But grace of God, man, grace of God.
Well, yeah, I crashed hard, like both. Well, to be frank, health and mental health, like uh, totally got burned out. But I was eating crappy food, and I was super isolated,
Mhm.
and
Yeah,
my brain just stopped working. I couldn't think, I couldn't sleep, I wasn't digesting without getting into any details. But
yeah,
like my body and my mind were not working, and I finally had to take like just like about 3 months actually, 3 months off just working on my health. I've
yeah.
lost about 50 pounds now, but yeah, thank you. That was
Excellent.
the great part. The great part was I started sleeping better.
Yeah,
I and I started my mind came back, and
yeah,
I'm also maybe a little bit more bold than I was, because it's clear to me like how I don't know if you want to say transient things like health are. It's like
yeah.
I don't know what could happen in a couple of years, and it's like, well, just sitting around on my duff isn't really using my gifts. You know what I mean? And
Yep.
so I'm a lot more into, you know, I'm so thankful that I was able to have my mind back, because I mean, you get it. Independent
Yeah.
consulting, you have to be on all the time, right?
Right. Right.
Your brain is your moneymaker. So yeah, I'm not going to take that for granted again.
Mike, you reminded me of something Michael Eaton shared, or it might have been I was at a dinner at a conference with Michael and some other software developers. And I don't know if you know who Michael Eaton is. He's a software developer. And somebody at that table said they were describing to early teenager about what it was like to do this kind of work, to work in IT.
Mm.
And their description was, it's like studying all day for the SATs every day. And then when you said you have to be on all the time, I was like, yeah, yeah. There's no and what people see, especially if you're in a public like you are starting this podcast, which congratulations, my heart's with you. I am. Yeah, I know how much work it is. It's really about a lot of work when you do it by yourself. Frank and I share duties, and by that I mean I do 10% and Frank does 90. But and data driven, by the way, we're in season 6 and we're over 300 shows. Data driven.tv. And I have been missing a lot lately because I've been so busy. Frank did a show with the last show we released in early November, late October. Fantastic show about AI and ethics. And
Oh,
go
cool.
check that out, datadriven.tv. I know I'm plugging in your podcast. Listen to Eric's other podcasts. Listen to 1 through 4 and listen to the ones after this. I get so much out of podcasts these days, but you're right. And a lot of people in our field, in the data part, have shared openly about their struggles with depression, with anxiety, with just mental thing, physical, some physically driven, some emotionally driven. A lot of people have said
Mhm.
something very similar to what you just said about health. And I'm with you. I've dropped about 30 pounds
Yeah.
since probably the beginning of the pandemic.
Mhm.
And it's been off for about a year and a half now. I'm in the 210s, right around the 210 range. I was 240.
Mhm.
I want to get below 200, not there right yet, but definitely exercising more. And I had the same exact experience you did. I sleep better. Um, and, once you kind of get into the habit of it, I eat better.
Yeah.
I had to be very intentional about it, especially the first few days. That was crazy. That was hard. And, and then, and then it got a little bit easier. Probably really didn't get normal feeling for me until after about a quarter. It's about 90. I had to really put my head down about 90 days. And I tried the cheat days thing,
Hmm.
That didn't really work well for me. I get that it works for others, but I needed to. I do. So it's not that I don't do cheat days. I do. I just don't do them every week. I probably do a cheat day every 3 weeks, 2, 3 weeks. And I find when I do, Eric, it just after doing that a few times, it's just like I'll have a hot fudge sundae like once a month or something. Just
Hmm.
sweets aren't my friend for a number of reasons. But
Right.
it's just you're right. It's a bunch of different things. And there's all of that science. I keep wanting to read it. And I've read the beginnings of so many books about how much of this has to do, how much that we attribute to our mind and our heart has to do with our gut.
Right. Right.
And it used to be they would say, they started out this the first time I read it. Let me say it that way. My first exposure to it was where your gut is like your second brain. And the more I
Hmm.
read about it, it's like, no, your brain is your second brain. That's your first. And it's just so much to that. And
Yeah.
yes, it's a lot of it. We all work together. We are not divisible, in that way that we used to think. I think it all applies. So
Right.
I lay down at 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. I read. Sometimes I sleep until my alarm is set for 5:15. About half the time I make it to that. I said 5:15, 5:45 now. It was set to 4:15 for a long time. But
Mm.
sometimes I wake up as early as 2. And, I've had 5, 6 hours of sleep. Well, not such 4 or 5 hours of sleep by then. And I'm just good. I'm
Oh,
up and I'm good. My mind says, hey, let's go. Sometimes it's go all day. Sometimes it's go till 10 and nap till noon and then go the rest of the day. And sometimes I sleep till the alarm wakes me up. And it's just getting enough sleep is crazy good for you. It just, at least I'll say it for me, it's crazy good for me.
oh yeah,
And
totally.
this is going to sound way out there, but there are nights when I get 3, 4 hours of sleep and I get up and it's just right for what I need to do that day. It's almost like it slows down. I'm ADHD, I'm diagnosed.
Mm.
It slows that down enough
Mm.
to match the work that I'm doing. Now, these days, I'm working on several projects.
Hmm.
And so I need my ADHD. That sounds wrong, but I do. I switch, it helps me switch contents so much faster, I think, than when and I'll find that you've heard this, you've done this.
Mm.
You've worked till the end of the day, you're trying to figure out some query or something, and you say, I am going to work on this until I get it. And you do. And you work to midnight, maybe 1, maybe 2 a.m. And you do get it.
Yep.
And you wake up the next morning, you feel good about yourself and all of that. Other days, you push away from the desk and shut the computer down and say, it's time to go do something else, unwind for the night, read a little bit, go to sleep. And by the way, those habits like that, I read every night before I go to sleep. And now, if I go read earlier in the day, I'll go to sleep. I've taught me to do that. But
Right.
you do that and you wake up in the morning and in 15 minutes, you've solved it. And you
Hmm.
spent 6 hours before and you solved it.
Right.
You know, I I need that. I'm 59 years old, Eric. I need every 5 hour and 45 minute block I can get. Okay.
Right. Totally. That's huge.
I am so proud of you and I congratulate you. And that's for everyone listening, that's the way you do it. You do what Eric does. You get to a spot and you realize things aren't good and
Mhm.
you find a way to stop. Maybe you can't stop for 3 months. Maybe you can't stop for a week. You stop for a day. You start changing your schedule, change something. And if
Mm.
you absolutely find yourself in a spot where you just feel like you can't go on, for for goodness sakes, talk to somebody.
Right.
Find a counselor, uh, a pastor, a friend, a priest, an imam. Talk to somebody. Talk to
Yeah.
somebody. We,
Yeah. I'm
the
so,
rest of us need you here. We do. We need you, and we want you here. And I know it doesn't feel like it because when you get in that state of mind,
hmm
nothing is as it seems. And
Yeah.
it's not because you're bad or wrong or doing things. It's because you have fallen down a hole. I don't know a better way to describe it.
Yeah.
And you did
That's
the
totally
right
fair.
thing, Eric. You did the right thing. And I thank God you did. And I'm so glad that you're here. And I can't wait to see where the podcast goes, where your other efforts go.
Yeah.
I'm
Thank
here
you.
cheering. I'm in your corner. I am cheering.
Yeah.
And people
I
go, well, wait a
appreciate
minute,
that.
Andy. He's doing stuff that'll compete with you. Yes, compete. Please
Yeah.
compete.
Yeah. It's so much fun. And I really do like talking with people because, I really like that term. I heard it. I don't know when I heard it, but the co-opetition, you know what I mean? It's like, you never know when what looks like your competition is going to be like your greatest ally, maybe somebody who can help you on a project or whatever,
Absolutely.
so
Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
don't even see it like that. It's like it's a big market, and yeah,
Yep.
it's great that people are doing stuff similar to me. Let's trade notes and both get
Yeah.
better, what the hell.
That's right. Well, I hope we get the opportunity to work on a project together, Eric.
Yeah.
I would be honored if we could. And yeah, let's talk some more about that offline. I
Yeah.
want to
Yeah,
follow up with you on that.
thanks so much. Do you want to just remind people where they can find you and your company?
Sure. So, a couple of things out there, but ENTDNA, Enterprise Data and Analytics, entdna.com.
I like that.
That's the consulting thing. My software is at dilmsuite.com. It's totally focused on SSIS.
Mm,
There's a lot of SSIS out there still in the wild, and it's an interesting kind of shift going on with that right now, I think. And you'd be surprised maybe you won't be surprised, but I get calls like once a year from somebody doing data transformation services still in 2022. And they're like,
wow.
what can we do? And that sort of stuff. And, it's interesting. Um, DILM, Data Integration Lifecycle Management Suite, SUITE.com is my SSIS software. Most of it's free, and about half the free stuff is open source. So
Wow.
I sell a couple of things there. But it's there to support DevOps with SSIS. And
Yeah.
so there's a lot of that. Those are andyleonard.blog. That's the blog. I'm woefully behind. You can tell when I'm busy, when I'm busy with work, because the blog falls right off the cliff.
That's how it
It's
goes, right?
yeah, but yeah, and I'm out. I'm doing presentations more again than I was for the past 3 years. Part of that was the pandemic. Part of it was me, getting three gut punches. But yeah, I'm out and about again. I love our community.
Mhm.
And we have a phenomenal, the Microsoft SQL Server data community is a fantastic community, and the envy of a lot of other communities out there,
Yeah.
other
So
technologies. So yeah,
so guys,
those are the
go
places.
see his pre-con over at the summit, right? The ADF. That sounds pretty exciting. I wish I could go, but
Thank you.
it's not in the cards.
I
But
understand. I've been there, done that. But I'm doing that pre-con. I did it in Boston at a SQL Saturday in October 2022. I am going to be delivering it again in 2023. Some of those places I can't mention yet, but just, look around and you'll see where you'll see it. If you see it and you're interested in it, I'd be honored if you come, not just to the paid stuff, but the free stuff. It's always an honor, Eric, to present. So even this podcast like this, or writing a blog post, any of those things, anybody reads it, it's just like cool.
yeah, it is cool,
It's just cool.
especially when you help somebody and you see deflating. But yeah, we should probably wrap it up. But I really
Okay.
appreciate it, and so thank you for coming, and also thank you guys for watching Covering Data podcasts, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. Bye. Thanks so much, everyone, for listening to the Covering Data podcast. If you'd like to learn more about how I can help you with your database needs, check out my website at coveringdata.com or email me at eric@coveringdata.com. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Thanks.